You are listening to an MLGA Network podcast.
Welcome to Thank You for Your Servers, a show which looks at the tech news of today, but from a libertarian perspective. Now here are your hosts, Thaddeus and Gary.
All right. Thank you for logging in to Thank You for Your Servers. I am Thaddeus Preston, aka Nick Way, and joining me once again, my co-host, my brother from another mother, Gary Guthrie. How are we doing?
We're doing fantastic, getting ready for a hot weekend. Going to go up and help my brother out with his new baby getting born. So,
oh man, that is awesome. That is awesome. And it has been hot out here out west. Not to geographically place ourselves, but yeah, it's been hot out west. Just probably about as hot as it's been back east. So yeah, man. So good luck with that. Hopefully your brother has a healthy baby. What are they having? Boy, girl?
It's a little boy. He's going to be named after his daddy. So little Timmy.
Little Timmy. So happy, somewhat it'll happen soon birthday to little Timmy. Anyway.
And congratulations to Tim and Heather. This is their first kid, and I can't wait to teach this kid to pull my finger.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. Be the cool uncle, not the creepy one. All right.
Damn right. Yep.
All right. So, yeah, this is our podcast, man, where we kind of rant eloquent about the tech news topics of the week from a liberty perspective. This and other wonderful podcasts are brought to you by the Make Liberty Great Again network of podcasts. So, I don't know where we want to go, man. I think the first topic I had in the show notes was kind of more of a victory lap. It was kind of a pat on the back, attaboy for Microsoft. I'm going to go a little out of order, and I think we need to talk about at least the Equifax settlement.
I would agree with you 100%.
So Equifax, the Federal Trade Commission, and other state and federal regulators have agreed on what Equifax owes for penalties. This is nearly 2 years after the company's massive data breach, a data breach that was so epic that it has definitely changed the way businesses are now building out like their critical infrastructure when it comes to maintaining, at the very least, the privacy and/or security of sensitive data from customers. The company is asked to pay $575 million. According to the terms of the settlement. At least $300 million of that is going to go into a fund to pay for credit monitoring services for affected customers. I guess they were already doing that like before, but like I think this is just additional.
I think they offered a lot of that up as a good faith kind of gesture. I don't know if a gesture, but I mean, I got to give them credit. You know, in the business that I'm in, I deal with the big three. I deal with Equifax, I deal with Experian, I deal with TransUnion. And what was really interesting to me when Equifax breach became public and everyone started knowing about this is Experian jumped on it and came down hard on a lot of their partners and a lot of their clients to basically push on them their own standards and said, okay, this is what you are going to comply with if you want to do business with us or communicate with us. So just from a business standpoint, this was very interesting because Experian has taken the Equifax breach and has seized an opportunity to kind of drive a lot of the security standards that are now getting put in place out in the market. It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, and it's a market-driven solution to the problem of this. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, the FTC and state attorneys general, state attorneys generals and the regulatory agencies within the states came in after the fact with the fine 2 years later.
Yep.
So what is
Equifax? It's always a reactive thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, what did Equifax do already? I mean, obviously they offered those gimmies. The industry changed. It started changing some of its practices and behaviors. And on top of that, generally speaking, like a lot of the Equifax, C-suite folks got canned. So in essence, the market did what it needed to do. Part of that $300, of course, they have to set aside of the $575 that they were fined. Includes like this credit monitoring service for disaffected customers, which includes more than 40% of the entire U.S. population. The fund can get boosted by another $125 million if the initial $300 million isn't enough to compensate all the consumers who make claims. So basically, I guess if there's 40% or of anyone who makes claims who are considered affected, i.e., if you get credit card fraud, I would imagine, or some sort of other type of credit history fraud. If you make a claim, there's additional funds that are going to be set aside to
I believe
right
it's
by some people.
Up to $20,000 per person. But again, the burden's on the consumer to prove, okay, you know what, fraud was committed against me. I had to do, honestly, I think the average person's going to get about $8, maybe.
Right.
It's one of those things where, okay, yeah, they're being punished. The bigger important thing is that there's an awareness, there's new standards being pushed, i.e. via Experian and
this has happened during industry. I think we have I think I talked about this in one of the past episodes about a talk I went to by a guy who was doing this kind of security research at the University of Texas at Austin, and how he had used Equifax as a case study is to figure out how the breach happened. And basically there's probably going to be new best practices for how one is to structure a distributed, basically at this instance, a distributed cloud infrastructure for security, a security framework for this. And so, like a lot of good comes from these. And people will be studying this Equifax breach for a very long time.
It'll be, if you want to go get your master's in computer science in 10, 20 years from now, I guarantee you this will be standard course study. I guarantee it. Right.
Yeah, definitely. If you're going to get a CISSP, or if you're going to be a hardcore practitioner of cybersecurity, because the algorithms in the machine learning, the AI won't handle it all. But it'll definitely it's good in the fact that going forward we have learned a lot and best practices will be implemented. It's bad for the people who are going to be affected for the foreseeable future. But not to kind of throw shade on this, the federal government 5 years ago lost way more sensitive data to foreign state actors in the form of the Office of Personnel Management. So it's, a little bit of financial history, which in piece, if gathered, if enough disparate data is gathered, can build a good profile of you and can make you a target if you're a target. But, never underestimate the ability of the government to be like, oh, you had a data breach? Hold my beer. So, I mean, that's...
Yeah.
All right. And so with that said, now we have to move to yet another branch of the government, not the FTC, but the DoJ, and their announcement as of this podcast yesterday. As of yesterday, the Justice Department reviewing the practices of market-leading online platforms. The review focuses on practices that create or maintain structural impediments to greater competition and user benefits. This is a press release I'm reading from the Department of Justice, Office of Public Affairs. So apparently, DOJ is now going to start investigating. They don't actually specify who in this particular press release, but we know who it is. It's basically Alphabet, Facebook, and Amazon.
Right.
And yeah, I say, what does it say here? I'm thinking, yes, the department. I'll read exactly from the press release here. The department's review will consider the widespread concerns that consumers, businesses, and entrepreneurs have expressed about search, Alphabet, social media,
Facebook,
and some retail services online.
Come on, man. They're not even trying.
You make it is so blatant. It's just like, so why don't you just say Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon? Just say it.
Oh my God.
That's
hilarious.
And I think, they because they want to investigate the broader industry, right? But those are three separate industries within tech, and so they're basically investigating big tech.
Yeah, exactly.
And this was a long time coming. Let's pour a little out for the Wild Wild West that was Internet 2.0, the social web, the mobile web, all these things that have like made our lives great and much easier. This is going to be dead, right? This is the beginnings, right? It's following the path exactly of regulatory capture. The only thing you have to take out search, social media, and retail services, and consolidate that and say railroads, or what was the other one? Standard Oil, or oh God, what was
you're going back to the day.
These antitrust cases and the theory around why you bring antitrust suits to somehow encourage market competition because you deem there might be impediments, be it because consumers are being harmed or like another company is being harmed. See, a lot of these things start out as either a competitor in the industry who can't compete, or I don't know, just other ne'er-do-wells who just like hating. I don't mean to not be able to articulate it better, but that's what it is. And so they basically run to the referee and they say, hey, this guy's checking me. And eventually the referee is going to get tired of you bugging him about this. And so the referee's going to be like, all right, well, let's look into it. And that's basically what's happening. And basically anything that comes out of this will be some sort of settlement. Right. In the instance right now, like the FTC right now is in the catbird seat because it's making Facebook pay $5 billion for some other shenanigans, I guess, that Facebook is accused of doing, or at the very least has been shown to be doing. I think we had discussed this in past episodes about the reason why I guess that this $5 billion fine was levied was because they somehow, and this is, I don't know why tech companies do this, they signed some sort of agreement in the past that says they would do something nebulous about protecting privacy. The Cambridge Analytica thing happens. The Russia investigation happens, in particularly when it comes to, was Facebook a platform that was used to amplify this fake news caused by Russian information operations. And so those two things, and the fact that the political class is mad at them anyway, caused the FTC to ultimately say, pay up, right? I mean, they're paying money all over the place. They're paying money in Europe. They're paying money here. I mean, there's part of it's just a shakedown.
Well, that's the game. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
It's frustrating, right? Because it's kind of like you see it coming. And ultimately, what will come out of this is more money out of pocket, more investigations, and regulation.
Well, like we talked about, we've talked about before. I mean, this is the price of doing business these days. If you're at that level, if you're at a Facebook level, an Amazon level, at a Google level, this is the price of doing business. You're going to get hit, and it's going to be like, okay, you got me. Here's your $5 billion, which is
true. Because they made 16.6 this quarter.
Right. They're making $60 billion. They're making $60 billion a year. Okay, you got me for 10%.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like you're right. I mean, I think we've both come to that conclusion. Like, it's just the cost of doing business today. What I feel ultimately is that this cost of doing business is this natural coercive impediment to grow your business.
Well, it's definitely a course, and talk about a barrier to entry, right? If you want to scare anyone into saying, okay, you are not ever going to grow this big because you'll have to deal with this, what better way than to just pay it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Or at least shape the rules for which these that are simply arbitrary, in my opinion. But let's shape the rules for which we'll be governed under, so we can at least maintain our $60 billion a year. And so, to me, it's regulatory capture. I mean,
it's totally regulatory capture. And I saw a comment earlier on one of the Liberty groups. I think MLG. It may have been the MLGA Liberty group. Anyway. It was, is it just me, or does Facebook want all this regulation? Yeah.
Yeah.
They absolutely want all this regulation.
Have you, it's like, well, of course, most people probably haven't. Murray Rothbard wrote a book about this. It's a very good book. It's a long book. It's actually pretty dry in a lot of areas. It's called The Progressive Era. The railroads wanted what they got. The meat producers wanted this. All the things, all the trusts that were ultimately busted up. Ultimately, what was tried was big players trying to cartelize, the government allowing them to cartelize, but understanding that ultimately these cartels break down. And so ultimately, as every time a cartel agreement would break down, one of the members of the cartel who didn't break up the cartel would ultimately go to a government or a regulatory agency and stuff like that. And as time moved on, these industries that we find have very high barriers to entry have all these rules, and you wonder, like, why? Who the heck enforces that rule?
It came from the bosses. I mean,
it came from the bosses. It came from the players of the past who are long gone, but the rule remained. Yep. And so, and it's bad going forward. We have AI, ML, new forms of computing, new biotechnology, all this stuff that's coming online. And there's just always this knee-jerk reaction to, like, do the innovation and then ask permission from daddy government to be like, can we do this? As opposed to, always worrying preemptively about what could possibly go wrong. And right, because you don't want to deal with the DoJ in 2055 because your AI-driven, biological, biotech company in the future is now facing antitrust, right? So what do we, so it's almost like they want to include government in how they build out their businesses. And
look at Uber and Lyft, right? I mean, they did the same thing.
Uber and Lyft are the opposite, right? But eventually you get beaten down by stories of cab drivers killing themselves, of Uber drivers sleeping in their cars, of how mean, Uber's like bro culture is, and all this other crap. And then suddenly, we got to bring on Ariana Huffington and all these leftists on the board so they can keep the boys in line. And basically now they actually now ask for permission before doing things in cities and stuff.
Well, now do.
Now they do. And like now, because what the statists want you to do as you build out your company is include them in the conversation, even though they have no damn business. They have no damn business being in the conversation. A and B, they don't know what the hell you're doing. They come in after the fact, right? And they're gonna keep doing this. One, as I jokingly say from episode to episode, because when you're in the industry of dealing with people and atoms, people suck. People suck. Right? I would much rather live in a world governed by algorithms and machine learning and AI because people suck.
People suck. Well, you know what? It's a double-edged sword. I mean, that's
people are important, but people do suck. I mean,
people do suck. Yeah.
I don't want that world, right? I want these technologies to empower people. And like I said, like before, like for all the evil that the tech press tries to paint Alphabet, Google, Amazon, and Facebook and Twitter and all these places as, they have enabled and empowered people. Those platforms, those companies, platforms in the true sense, those companies, their capabilities, what they have built has made people's lives tremendously better. And I think we lose sight of that every time we get worried about things. Like the privacy thing is weird when it comes to Facebook because the rank and file person doesn't care. They don't care. The Equifax thing or the Office of Personnel Management thing, that's actually a bigger deal than, what Facebook apparently did. It's sad, right? Because when these regulations come into place, man, Alphabet through DeepMind, Google AI, Google in general, even YouTube to a certain extent, are doing amazing things. Like Facebook AI and Facebook are doing amazing things. These companies are contributing so much open source to the community. They're contributing compute. They're doing all this wonderful stuff. And like in the back of their mind, though, it's just like, well, we can't push the envelope too much. We can't get too big because we have to protect our flank. And really, a lot of this stuff with the DoJ is these tech companies basically crapping all over their right ideological flank. Because the left is always going to hate your guts when you get too big. But at the very least, the right.
Well, anyone starved for some sort of, I don't know. The way I see it, and I get a little cynical sometimes or a little conspiracy theorist sometimes, but really, they're just looking for the biggest targets because that's going to give them the most publicity. It's going to give them the most visibility, and they're going to go after it as long as the action roughly aligns with their agenda, with their narrative. They're going to go after it.
Yeah, no, this has been a long time coming. I mean, here comes the regulation. They're going to. We said last week they're going to. Section 234 of the Communications Decency Act is dead.
It's dead.
I mean, there's vultures circling the corpse. Yeah. It's over. And I don't think these people truly understand they're beginning assaults that started with really net neutrality, in my opinion, or at least the attempt at that. That's what started poking at this.
Yep.
And and then you have FOSTA, and you're going to have something worse come down. And then it's being picked away, and it's actually more pressures being put on because our companies are global. More pressures coming from overseas. We're going to have a very segmented internet going forward. But these companies, we should have a segmented internet going forward. However, these companies are global companies, and they believe in economies of scale and keeping things standard. We're dealing with European regulations. We're dealing with blasphemy laws in the Islamic world. We're dealing with, even though China has its own little internet and stuff, we're dealing with a lot of the residual effects of the great Chinese firewall. And so, this is a broader free speech issue, generally speaking, but like it affects us. And so like this belief that like regulation is going to save us and that algorithms are going to get rid of hate and stuff like that, it all comes back to what we discuss all the time, man. It's culture.
You know what's funny, Thaddeus, is my son, who's 17, came home the other day, and he was talking to me about Tiananmen Square and about how in China, if you search for it, it doesn't exist. And this is him talking to his friends and developing his own understanding of the world, his own worldview and everything. But this is a very real thing to him at 17, that there are countries out there who suppress this stuff just because they have to for self-preservation.
Yes, the self-preservation of very totalitarian and
right. And it takes me back to, because I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, where, the Cold War was it was the thing. It was the only thing, right?
The Russians could nuke us at any moment.
Exactly. And, even though that maybe that threat is not the same threat, the threat of confining our free speech or suppressing it or whatever is very real. And it's to me, I mean, it's kind of dark, but at the same time, to me, it's refreshing to know that I've got a 17-year-old who's out there going, holy crap, this is a real thing that's going on in the world today, especially in a country like China, who has an insane amount of control and an insane amount of influence in the world over what is supposed to be basically a neutral platform. Right.
A true platform in the sense.
Correct.
This totalitarian march, this thing that we've discussed in the past, that we've discussed episode after episode after episode, is a real thing, right? And it comes under the guise of protecting you.
Yes.
And I'm just here to let you know, if you were sympathetic to that view, it is. Let me let you know, it's a fool's errand. It is never going to happen.
No, you will never. Yeah.
You will never get it. I mean, you'll end up like a Uyghur Muslim in Western China in a camp being re-educated,
or being harvested for organs, as we have seen in. I don't know if you saw those news reports this last couple weeks, but the Uyghur Muslims and the Falun Gong.
Oh, yeah, those guys. Yes, those guys. That is absolutely true, and it's funny. No one. Right, these platforms have allowed us to know that that's happening. I've heard about Uyghur Muslim suppression and repression in those western provinces of China. I've known about that for a decade.
Oh yeah,
and like they don't. I mean, it's a funny thing about the Chinese is because they've been so empowered. At least the regime has been so emboldened. Empowered by the technologies that we create here in the West, and emboldened by the fact that like we don't like to judge, right? We accept that cultural relativism is the way we should look at the world, even though that's not to sound all curmudgeon and stuff. That's not true. They've turned the repression up to 11, man. I mean, they
Absolutely.
went from like, oh, so no one's really paying attention, and the West has this. We have this aura, right? We project this aura that we hate like Muslims and stuff. And so if they just curb it under terrorism, then the West won't say anything. And we haven't said anything, you know. We haven't. We've said nothing. Only in the last couple of years have we started being like, hey, so we were doing some satellite imagery and we noticed that there are these massive prison-like structures that you guys, and that we're getting reports that like people are just getting snatched up off the street in this province and stuff. And you look and you see it's much worse than we thought. Right. It is dystopian to the point where it's funny, right? I mean, the geek part of me is just like, wow, that's an intense data set, man. Imagine if we unleash ML models on that data set that they have. But at the same time, oh crap, that data set is like people being abducted, having their pictures taken, their dental records.
Well, that's where collected. It crosses, the cultural side. It's like I look at that from a human standpoint, going,
"That's terrible."
That is a person. That is a human being, and you are essentially, the Falun Gong. And the only reason I even know anything about Falun Gong, and God bless the free market, is Shenyun. I don't know if you've seen the billboards where you are, but they're all over the place here. Shenyun, it's this
You have a larger Asian population for obvious reasons than we do.
It's crazy. So Shenyun is this Chinese art performance of dancers and music and martial arts and whatever. But and there's billboards for it all over the place, right? And I did a little looking at it because I was kind of sick and tired of seeing them. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, it's driving me nuts. I don't know what this is. I have no clue. Anyways, I look into it and it turns out Shenyun is a blatantly apostolic presentation of this Falun Gong study of spirituality and whatnot. And the reason why they are bringing it here and bringing it so in your face is because of the oppression that they are receiving over in China. Because it's essentially it's an undermining movement against the Chinese, communist government, whatever you want to call it, whatever.
Yeah.
But I gained an interest in it, and I started doing a little, and then of course, you have mentioned and talked about the Uyghur Muslims, which clearly, I mean, forever they've been oppressed and put into camps and whatnot. But the Falun Gong, same thing in China. They are gathered, they're put into these camps, according to, like Amnesty International, which I take with a little bit of a grain of salt, but also with,
Yeah. Sometimes because those groups have not done themselves any favors in the past. But there are other third-party groups, other NGOs that are have less of a kind of a checkered past and a storied history that'll give you everything you need to know when it comes to all these religious minorities that get like completely screwed over in the Chinese regime. And here's the deal: that technology comes mainly from the West. Like the one thing the Chinese are great at. They don't innovate very well, but they're very good.
They steal it.
But they're very good at implementation. And so I mean, these companies, these global companies are in a slightly unique position, right? Which is why I don't like the fact that we're beating up on them, right? Because of silly things like my privacy. It's just like, or you could just not use the platform. Right. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that people like to say to the disparate groups, the conservative groups, your neo-Nazi groups, or whatever groups, when they say, hey, you're suppressing us on these platforms, quote unquote. Well, won't you build your own? This is like, okay.
You can't.
you can't. I've chronicled that last week. And it's like, you can't. And it's just like, well, yeah, you probably could. But, I mean, that's just the same argument that you will give if, like, oh, there's been a privacy violation because of, Twitter or whatever and stuff like that. All right, well, you could just choose not to use those platforms if you're worried about that. Like, I read an entire article from the Washington Post about people who are never Googlers, right? I mean, just because it makes your life inconvenient, if you have the confidence of your convictions, then you'll just go through with it, right? So I don't like the fact that we beat up on these companies for these stupid things when in the rest of the world, like, these technologies are being used to do brutal things. And, like, these companies that we have championed, Google at one point did actually seem to have a backbone when it came to China. Now, I mean, it's tried to flirt with, in the last 5 years, it's desperately tried to flirt with getting into the Chinese market.
Yeah.
And like, there's governments around the world that are not, we should use these companies and their platforms with all their warts and all, to push liberty, right? It's like, hey, our platforms are open, we can do whatever and stuff like that. But no, we're too busy about our own rotting culture. I mean, truth be told, I mean, maybe some countries have it right by, like, keeping out the rotting American culture. You don't want I don't think SJW. It's like this. If we want to bring the Chinese Communist government to their need, I guess we should probably export social justice warrior culture. But I don't, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, man. I mean, that's just me.
You gotta keep in mind, culture's a weird thing, because culture, it's more than just traditions and language and things like that. It's also, it takes into account local environment, right? Local resources. This is why in the Philippines, you will eat this egg that has been fertilized from a street vendor, the balut, which to a Westerner like me, I'm going to say, hell no, I will starve, and I'm not going to eat that, right? But culture it's so much more complex than just simply, a value or what a social justice warrior will throw out there. So,
yeah, it's almost like they try to parameterize elements of the culture because they want to algorithmically nudge or algorithmically cancel out the portions of society that don't conform to or even our past, that don't conform to the contemporary view of a social justice leftist.
And that's
and that's where we fail.
Well, that's where we fail, and that's where I seriously see, and you mentioned it in the past, the whole attempt to sterilize things, the attempt to make things a formula. We are human beings, and you will never be able to boil it all down to a formula, But it's this attempt to do that I don't know, in a lot of ways for me, it creates a lot of internal conflict, right? Because I see the value in homogenizing things and trying to bring things together, but at the same time, I struggle with it because I'm a human being, and I'll hear, someone say XYZ, and I've got this gut instinct in me that says that's not right. That doesn't work. And you got governments, you got platforms, you've got people trying to boil this thing down, and it doesn't boil down. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
they want an easy answer. I think a lot of these platforms, a lot of these companies want easy answers, which is why they want regulations, because you can code regulations. Like if you have an instruction, you can code it. And that's the way it's funny. In the past, it was because of regulatory capture. I think in this instance, it's simply because they need, and all businesses want this anyway. This is another reason why they do it. They need the predictability because they know they have the expertise and the manpower and the brain power, honestly, to code this into existence. So then they can make compliance code-based and drive down that cost. And that way they can get on with doing what they want to do. I'm just arguing that some of what they're doing isn't been a net positive in the past couple of years, at least the past couple of years.
Right.
So, yeah, it is what it is,
I'm with
man.
you.
And like I said, man, this is the beginning, and we'll see this slow train wreck. And every week or every time there's a development in these, if it's a DoJ case or the FTC, or even we'll start looking overseas too, at these kind of regulatory agencies that are going to be levying fines and creating rules and stuff. This is what it's like to create an incumbent. You're going to end up with basically Facebook being the AT&T of the social web.
Yep.
It's just what you're going to deal with. You're going to end up with Alphabet being, or more importantly, Google, right? Or even YouTube for this matter. Or because they have so many verticals. There will be their respective. It will be the ABC, CBS, NBC. YouTube will be the ABC, CBS, NBC of online video, and because it will be cemented in, and any upstarts won't be able to scale. And it's funny, these incumbents will be, because they're following the rules, they'll be allowed to notch out any competitor. They may start jacking up, CDN prices for hosting and delivering this stuff. They may drive up cloud computing costs because here's the deal. Microsoft and or Amazon are on the verge of one of the largest cloud government contracts in history with the United States government. And this is how AT&T ended up with its monopoly. The government wanted something reliable, to a platform that was reliable. The phone company said, we'll give you 5 nines. And for that, the government turned a blind eye to their very anti-competitive practices because, we need the phone network. I could see something like that happening for cloud infrastructure because now with this, if they're locked in, they're locked in. So, man, that was, I promise, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last depressing story of the week. And we went off on a tangent, but we came back because at the end of the day, all these things matter, man. Like when you bring all that stuff together, we were both rambling about, like, it's going to come back to that, right? It's going to come back to, like, these aren't positive developments in the future of tech and the web. But speaking of future tech and the web, and a company that has weathered the storm of antitrust, Microsoft is killing it. First, this week, they reported $37.7 billion in Q4 of 2019 for revenue. That's Azure 64% up, Surface 14%. Dude, when did the Surface, which started out as a joke, but the Surface is like killing it.
I will tell you right now, the practical the practical convenience and the practical application of Surface has almost no match in the market right now. The ability to have the stylus and do whatever you want. My daughter, I will tell you this right now. My daughter is working for an interior designer here in South Orange County. Fantastic guy. Does work on, in fact, one of their projects right now is on Sandra Bullock's house that she just sold for I don't know how many $1 million. Anyway, all of her work is done on a Microsoft Surface. Yesterday, I walked out to the back patio and she's out there trying to design how she wants to paint her wall in her bedroom. And she's got these crazy designs. It's this hexagonal, like honeycomb type structure, and she's deciding on. Anyway, my point being, this Surface, Microsoft's done something right. She was doing all of her work in PowerPoint, of all things, to design her bedroom wall because it was the easiest software to put everything together, to put her color palettes together, and to make this thing come to life. they have done something right.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that stuff, creative stuff, used to be solely
purely Apple.
It was solely Apple.
Yeah, that was it.
Only.
If you didn't have a Mac, you couldn't be a designer. But now, if you've got a Surface, especially a Surface Pro, you're a player.
We use it at work. We use them at work a lot.
They're fantastic.
They're pretty robust. I mean, our corporate IT neuters them, but when they're unencumbered from corporate chicanery, they're incredibly useful.
Yes.
All right, so like LinkedIn was up 25%. I forgot that Microsoft owned LinkedIn.
I didn't even know that.
It's so funny. I actually logged on to LinkedIn for the first time in like 6 years, like yesterday. And once I cleaned out all the spam and got whatever, it's somewhat useful. If you're a professional and you want to do professional development and or really interface with people and stuff, it's kind of like a professional Facebook. There's no political BS on there. It's just strictly I kind of enjoyed the experience, particularly when you follow certain industries like I do, information technology, AI, machine learning, some other engineering things. It's kind of useful. Little spammy though, but it's actually kind of useful. But it's up 25%. Microsoft today reported earnings for the fourth fiscal quarter of 2019. It's including revenues again of $33.7 billion, net income of $13.2. That equates to about $1.71 a share.
Wow.
And it's just killing it year-over-year growth. Another thing that they did this week, Microsoft invested $1 billion in OpenAI. And if you're not familiar with OpenAI, think of OpenAI. So if you've heard of DeepMind, which was the British kind of artificial intelligence kind of company that Google bought 4 or 5 years ago, they do a lot of research. I follow a lot of computing and quantum computing, machine learning, and AI out there. And a lot of papers via ArchiveX gets posted. I mean, and almost half of them are either authored out of OpenAI and DeepMind or co-authored by people from OpenAI and DeepMind. And OpenAI was kind of founded by Elon Musk and a couple of other people to do responsible, I guess, AI development. They're the organization that came up with the I forgot what they called the algorithm or the framework for but this thing could write very convincing fiction. This is all AI based. It would just write it. It was so convincing that OpenAI decided
this is that million monkeys on a typewriter thing again, right?
Yeah. Except because you can make those million. Imagine allowing those million monkeys to write 1,000,000 times and then them learn each time through each epoch or iteration how to write something better. And essentially they've done this.
Right.
But basically what's happened is Microsoft is basically going to be their exclusive cloud provider. There's going to allow them to use $100 million of Azure compute. And they're going to work together to develop an Azure AI supercomputing system in AI. They want with this partnership to push exclusively for to move us basically toward AGI, which is basically artificial general intelligence. And so they're going to basically try to, with this money from Microsoft and this partnership from Microsoft, it gives them access to the huge Azure cloud. It's a one-up from Amazon, and it's definitely a one-up from using Google's cloud. and IBM's cloud and everyone else's cloud. So, I mean, and like I said, this is a very innovative organization. They have very lofty goals. I think they're naive goals, but some of the smartest, some of the podcasts I've been listening to, some of the papers I've been reading and brushing past, some of the smartest SOBs work for OpenAI. And the combined like Microsoft's research teams, which are brilliant. Microsoft research teams are almost as brilliant as Google's research teams, and almost as brilliant as Facebook's research teams. That's one thing I like. Going back to these companies that the DoJ wants to shut down or do whatever with. Some of the brightest minds in the world work at these companies, and these guys solve hardcore problems. And the more money these guys have via their regular business verticals to invest in R&D, like the good old days of Bell Labs are back when it comes to Amazon, IBM, Facebook, Google, Uber, OpenAI. All these guys have, amazing R&D wings that do like pure computer science, pure science, and we're gonna force. What could how much could Facebook have done and invested either back into the company or to their R&D efforts instead of paying that $5 billion to the FTC? Who on the other end of the FTC of that FTC fine? Who gets money on the other side of that? Is that money going to be distributed? I don't understand. Somebody needs to explain that to me. I'm pretty sure.
It's pretty much just general funds, whatever. It's the smoke and mirrors.
Okay, so it doesn't go to anyone, right? It just gets wasted.
Of course it does. It goes to some fund that does whatever. I don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah, no one knows, right? But like, that's money you can invest in research and development, right? And anyway.
But that's government for you, right? They're going to take the money. They're going to say, "Okay, we got it." Okay. And then what? It's a black hole. There's nothing there.
So are you going to redistribute it to the people who were hurt as a result of this suit?
No, you're not going to do anything with it.
Oh my God. Oh man, okay. We're in the happy spots now. Let's get out of there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to veer aside. We're back in a happy place. Okay. And more news of Microsoft killing it. Microsoft open sources an interpreted ML for explaining black box AI. So I guess they have done they've open sourced kind of this toolkit for solving kind of the problem with AI black boxes. So when you think of these kind of AI networks, particularly the deep neural networks and stuff, there's the deeper the neural network, the less obvious it is how that neural network came back to its decision. This interpret ML will help developers experiment with ways to introduce explanations of the output. This is going to become increasingly important as you start kind of putting these AI, machine learning algorithms in the real world where they actually have real world consequences. And you're going to need to audit how that AI came to the decision that it came to.
Yeah, that's where it gets really dirty, right?
Yeah. This is the people problem, right? But I mean,
exactly.
Because people want, particularly if, like you go to the doctor and like the AI says, yeah, man, you got testicular cancer, right? It's like,
right.
I mean, well, can I get a second opinion? Well, how did you come to this conclusion? Well, the AI said. Like, well, how did the AI come to that conclusion?
And that whole thing is to me, that's the kind of, I don't know if it's a hypocritic thing or, a hypocritical thing, or if it's just human beings trying to over sterilize things. I don't know. We try to over explain things. We try to over understand things sometimes to the point where it's crippling almost.
Yes, and this is true. Like a lot of the science, like for instance, a lot of the sciences, a lot of the career paths, a lot of the industries that you want to get people into. The highest barrier to entry isn't the the person's inability to grasp information. It's the really kind of weird and unnecessary information that kind of clouds it and stuff. The explanation, right? Right. It's kind of why object-oriented programming was such a big phenomenon and stuff, because I don't really care how, from an opcode and machine code level, what it's doing. I just need this abstraction.
I need it to just do what it's supposed to do.
Right. Now, granted, it's gotten convoluted. Again, it's another thing that it's gotten convoluted and overcomplicated and stuff like that. Human beings do have a tendency, particularly in industries and stuff. Like, I even noticed this with AI and ML, right? Where, like, when I first started reading about it and stuff about a year ago, none of it made sense. There's all these acronyms. Acronyms are really the devil's. They're the devil. They're absolutely the devil.
I hate acronyms. My sister's in the military.
Jargon.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
She's in the military, and you being ex-military, I don't know if you say it ex-military, but you understand what I'm talking about. All she talks about is acronyms.
Acronyms and jargon.
Like,
yeah.
Will you just shut up and speak English, because it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, it is. God, it is so. It's funny, right? Because a lot of those barriers to entry are just tribal knowledge that seem to be buried within these priesthoods of whatever. And like I said, any tool that helps with transparency, I understand. Though, yes, we do have a nasty tendency to want more detail than we require. In this instance, though, from a pure kind of computer science point of view and a research point of view, a lot of times you want to better understand what your model is doing, and so this is actually pretty cool.
There's a balancing act. I mean,
yeah,
you have to accept some. You have to accept some level of dirtiness in order to really leverage the value, I think, of something like AI. You can't try to re-sterilize it.
Yeah,
that's just
hopefully,
my take.
I understand that, and I mean, and hopefully this doesn't go down the road to undermining ultimately what AI is. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just math.
Well, and that's the danger. I mean, as soon as you start bringing in any oversight, right, government or even business oversight, they're going to want to minimize the risk by saying, okay, I need to know every single thing that went into this. And part of the thing with AI is the acceptance that we don't know what all goes into it, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be this tolerance there that I don't think exists at some of the higher levels because they don't understand why it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, that's what I think. I think this kind of, now that I'm kind of listening to what you're saying, it in a way, it's kind of a computer scientist kind of, I don't know if it's
it's a conundrum.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like they want to know how everything works from in a research point of view, but
right.
This is why computer scientists that do computational biology and stuff like that, and these computational sciences that deal with the real world, they can't stand the sloppiness of how it is.
Yeah, they don't like it at all.
They don't like it at all, right? And I get to a certain extent that we may need to accept a certain error bar from the AI and ML as just right. because these things are evolving. Right, they do very probabilistic things, right? It's just like wow, I didn't know it was going to do that, and the knee-jerk reaction is to be like, well, why did it do that? As opposed to maybe accepting the fact that like maybe it's called machine learning. It's called machine learning for a reason.
Maybe it just did it just because. Maybe it just felt like it. You know, it takes me back. You know, we talk a lot. You know, being a tech podcast, it's amazing how much we talk about culture and humanity. And, culture and humanity it's always been dirty. It's always been unpredictable. Well, I won't say unpredictable, but definitely there's a lot of, what do you call it? I can't remember. I'm killing myself with the word entropy, right?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's right.
So, if we're really trying to advance AI and we're really trying to advance our computing to a point where it's really useful at a human level, we have to accept a level of that entropy, a level of unpredictability, and a level of unexplainability.
Right. Yeah, it's like we want the we need to maybe accept a 2 or 3 sigma as opposed to demanding 5 or 6 sigma.
There you go.
And it's kind of weird, like how that how we've actually, the big breakthrough with machine learning was actually kind of allowing a little bit of that probabilistic nature of learning, right? Like, it's funny how, like, machine learning works by repetition and back propagation and stuff like that. It's funny how they're like, yeah, that's how we train our models to, 97% or 96% or something like that. But, like, they don't tend to apply that, and this is me getting off on a tangent, to, like, how we educate children. And why maybe we need to embrace what the ML, maybe embrace the methods we're using to train the ML to our children, because
Are you suggesting that standard testing and things like that are not doing a good job for our kids?
They're not. We teach for mastery of a test. We never teach to mastery of a subject.
100%.
Salman Khan came up, explained this in a TED Talk that I saw him on back in the day when I'm trying to slug through math and looking at Khan Academy videos. And he brought up this beautiful analogy where it's just like, if you were building a house and you said, okay, I need you to lay out the foundation, and the foundation is, all right, 80% decent. Okay, we can move on to now starting to build, like, the frame. And then, like, they build the first floor, and it's like, it's about 76%, 75%, still passing. So yeah, now we can build the second story. There's no way in hell you would allow that.
Well, but then again, to me, that's comparing apples to oranges, right? Because you're talking about a physical product versus an intellectual or an abstract product that can morph over time within the context of where it's at, right? So,
but in most subjects, you have to have, there's certain things you have to have an absolute mastery of because they build on other things. It's more an analogy. It's more an analogy as, like, as you build on it, what you do ultimately have is you have a shaky foundation when you get to the higher level abstractions that we're talking about, because it's like because the foundation is screwed up, right? Well, you never learn to mastery to certain things that you needed to master.
If you look at something like music, if you're 1% off in music, everybody is going to hear it, even if they're not trained in hearing it, right? So absolutely, there are those things that have to be sterilized, but there are other things that I think don't necessarily have to be sterilized.
Oh yeah, and that's just, I'm saying. I mean, but I just found it kind of odd, right? That we expect a high degree of confidence in these ML models that we're modeling after really the human brain, but yet actual human brains, we wonder why we get a terrible result out of the human brains that exist. when like, well, why don't we just hold that human brain to the same standard as we hold an ML model, where it's just like, all right, you got 86%. That's not good enough. You truly haven't mastered this yet, because if we're going to move on to the next workflow next workflow of the data flow that we're giving you, we need to make sure that you're accurate up to a certain percentage so we can then move on to the next workflow. And it's not a apt analogy. It's not even all that accurate. I mean, it's just saying it just makes you think that like it's almost like we treat these machines, we expect so much more from these machines and stuff like that we've modeled after human brains, but like we don't tend to think that maybe we could look back at our motivation for developing these models with the architecture of the human brain and being like, well, maybe that's why education doesn't give us the results we want. Right. Yeah. And it's also too, you have to tailor it. You really do have to tailor it to the student. That's what I hope these technologies enable. I hope these technologies enable these things, because it is very, very important. But again, we got off on another tangent, and that's crazy. Yeah, that's actually good, because I really didn't have anywhere else to go after all this, backslapping of Microsoft for being not a crappy company, and basically as kind of a showing that like, hey, these companies are doing incredible things that are going to change the future. I used to think that like the future was big data and the web. Now I'm thinking like, yeah, those are just pieces and workflows into AI. If AI and AGI and even advanced ML becomes a true, that changes the world, because it enables so many other industries and that we couldn't even think of. Material science, quantum computing, proteomics, all these things. Even indoor farming. It just, all we have to do is just keep creating the technologies that create the data, create the infrastructure, create the workflows. 5G will connect all the Internet of Things, and that'll all produce data. That data can then be fed into models. These models can then make us iteratively better at whatever we put it against. And these companies are doing great things, but they have to deal with BS from the state. So, boo. And that will probably wrap it up for us. Gary, you got any parting shots, parting thoughts? Maybe, I don't know, repping your Twitter handle, possibly?
I still no.
You have not updated your avatar.
I've been busy. I've been a little preoccupied.
All right. Well, I'm just going to shamelessly plug Nick Way, at Nick Way on Twitter. That's NICKWAYE. Also, if you follow me on Twitter, I am also going to put in the show notes my Twitter list for following quantum computing and AI and tech news. This is where I get most of my stories. It's where I geek out on this technology, because I just learned in the last couple months that AI, AGI is going to enable all the things we've discussed and talked about when it comes to 5G, when it comes to Microsoft doing great things, cloud computing, Internet of Things. So, I'll throw that in the show notes this week so you can, follow that up. But definitely follow me at Nick Way. And what is your handle again, Gary?
At Guthrie Gary. And until I figure out a different one, okay, here's my promise. Within the next week, I'll figure out something that I don't have to spell out to everybody. How's that sound?
Take your time.
Okay.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for us. Thank you for logging in Thank you for your servers. We're logging out. Until next week, later.
Talk to you later. Bye.